Super excited to help kind of kick off the day. Thanks for being here so early. So first things off, quick intro. So again, my name is Jin Bae. I'm the Google North America go-to-market lead for MongoDB. Based here in New York City, sometimes in Miami. Trevor?
I'm CTO and co-founder at Current. We're a fintech based here in New York. And yeah, this week is year 8 officially from incorporation.
Oh my gosh.
So it's been a while.
Congrats. Well, we're going to tell this phenomenal story and the phenomenal ride you've had in those 8 years. So first off, just a little bit about Current. What is Current?
Yep. Do I need one too? I'm great. Awesome. Well, yeah, it's all on the slide. It's amazingly prepared by our brand team, I'm sure. But we're a fintech based here in New York. We build banking services for millions of Americans. And we're not a bank ourselves, but we work with banks. And really, we are just the technology layer for all of the products and features that we offer. Yeah.
So it's amazing that was actually going to be my trick question for you, that you don't consider yourself a bank.
Yes, no, we don't.
So I was going to say, are you a bank or are you a technology company?
We are definitely not a bank. We're happy to be a technology company, but I think one of the things that's really important is that we have great relationships with the banks that we work with. So we work with smaller banks across the US, and we really bring customers to them because ultimately our customers have a relationship with the bank, but we provide the full experience, all of the servicing, the entire platform that our customers are interacting with.
Wow. It's amazing, you really found a niche in the market. But before we actually dig in, just a few words about our partnership. So the Google partnership with MongoDB. So the partnership started back in 2018, and just 5 years later, we actually recently significantly expanded our partnership. What does this mean? Well, first of all, we doubled the infrastructure of Google to support Atlas, and we have strengthened our priorities, our joint priorities. One of them is to deepen Google integrations with Atlas on MongoDB. So for example, BigQuery. BigQuery is Google's data and analytics platform where we have deepened our integrations, and it's all about AI lately. So we have some exciting announcements today, if you stop by the Google booth, that we have AI integrations with Atlas on Google Cloud. So please stop by, we're running demos on that today. Another priority for us, and fun fact, Current actually is a graduate of the Google for Startups program.
Oh yeah.
And also MongoDB also has a startup program as well. So we share that commitment to helping startups with resources and tools they need to get started and to accelerate.
Yeah. I'd like to say we came for the credits, but we stayed for the Kubernetes. So yeah, that program was really awesome for us.
Did marketing get that, that catchphrase? Let's capture that. Okay, and then also Partner of the Year, significant that Google named Mongo Partner of the Year, and easily procurable through the Google Marketplace. All right, enough about that. Let's get to the amazing story. So Current is, when you started out Current, you decided proactively to make and to build the technology, your core technology, as a differentiator in the market. So talk a little bit about that.
We weren't that thoughtful or like forward thinking. I think to the story of how we got started, I started my career at Morgan Stanley trading foreign currencies. And the guy who hired me, Stuart Sopp, is the CEO of Current. And so after he left, I followed him and we started doing a lot of things. I was really excited about Bitcoin at the time and some of the other emergent blockchain technologies like Ripple, and this is back in 2014, 2015, so it was kind of a different space than it was today, but we were both excited about this idea that the way that money works is transforming, and we want to be a part of that transition into whatever banking 2.0. How do we connect people with the changes of how money works? And so in 2015, we officially incorporated as Finco Services Inc., aka DBA Current, as we came up with the name after that. And we started looking at what are the ways in which we can bridge people to money in ways that never existed before. And actually, some of the early proof of concept types of things we were building was, what is banking without banks? How does money work outside of sort of the traditional ecosystem? And so the very first thing we put out was, okay, well, what if your balances could just be stored on these new blockchain technologies? But we didn't have a way to actually deliver that via an API or a consumer experience, so we started building our own system of record to represent this distributed system of record, which is underpinning a lot of these things. And it sort of naturally led us to creating ultimately what became a banking core out of necessity. There was no business model there, and ultimately we'd still have to make money, we have to survive as a company, and we made our way towards more traditional banking services like checking accounts, savings accounts, but we came at it from the approach of let's build the technology ourselves so that we give ourselves the flexibility of being able to connect to anything. When we talk about like a financial substrate of like where is the money, actually being able to connect and have that flexibility has really led us down this path of creating financial technology, creating a core banking engine, and actually doing it all in a cloud native way.
Well, let's talk more about that. So when you decided to build your core technology, you could select any services to do that, and you selected Mongo Atlas on Google. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about why you did that?
Yeah, we got towards Atlas after running like local instances of it. Like it was in the early days, like I didn't have that much of a developer background before Current, and so I was just kind of figuring out as I went. And one of the things that attracted me to Mongo in those early days was how flexible it was, because you can kind of get started without having to make some of the harder decisions when it comes to database design, including like how you want to index the data, how you want to like shard and scale. And that flexibility, I think, has remained, for many years that's been one of Mongo's biggest selling points, and today that is still one of the biggest selling points, which is you can really iterate and start building without having to have the full picture of what you're doing. So with Current in particular, we've had so many products. Like our first product that actually is still available to customers today was launched 2 years after we actually started the company. So tons of proofs of concepts, tons of iterations, whole other experiences which don't even exist anymore.
Well, hold on that. So it sounds like lots of lessons learned.
Oh, tons, yeah.
So if you could give some advice or some feedback, just what your experience was during that time, like what would it be for startups today?
Yeah, it's just survive. That's the only thing that matters. Figure it. Like I mean, that's I guess the evolutionary force of the company either survives or it goes out of business. So that pressure is tremendous, and adaptability leads to survivability, which is like all you have to do is remain around while figuring out that product market fit. So we were able to remain around sufficiently long enough to figure it out, and since then really have just let the customers kind of drive our roadmap.
So let's talk a little bit about disruption. You disrupted, you were purposely disruptive. Disruption is a word that everyone says today. Are you still disrupting? What disruption is there for you in the future?
Yeah, when it comes to disruption, like we work in financial services, so this is not a move fast, break things type of place. This is money. Trust is one of the most important things that we think about, and so really the way that we approach problems is using the technology moat that we've created. How do we deliver services in a way that customers have never been able to have before? And so how do we improve financial outcomes with everything that we've built so far? And so disruption is there in the sense of we're not a digital transformation story. We are cloud native, and this is how we've always built products and services. So from that perspective, maybe against a bank or against like traditional financial service technology, we have a pretty large advantage. But we really look at it from the perspective of how do we deliver the most value to our customers? How do we build a business model that others can't really follow? And we've done that through technology and through sort of the operational leverage we get by building that ourselves.
So Trevor, you're eight years in to this journey, and there must be competitors nipping at your heels, also trying to disrupt in different ways. So what applications are you developing, or what are you doing right now to keep ahead of the pack?
I think like the biggest advantage we have is our technology. And so we've been really approaching, we offer all the banking services, right? You've got checking accounts, savings accounts. We're launching a credit building product. We have investing, rewards. It's really like our advantage is how do we bring those all together in an ecosystem? And we are uniquely positioned to do that because we control how all of these things come together. When I talk about building a core banking engine, building that system of record, that is, if you think at the end of the day, our product is balance. Like how much money is in your checking account. The way you get to that balance is through debits and credits. And those are really the features, whether it's using a debit card, using a credit card, getting your paycheck, getting rewards. So we really kind of control all of the features of that product, and that's really our advantage. Is we can work with whatever partners are most appropriate to facilitate the financial service, but aggregate it in a way that's easy to use and very convenient for our customers. So that's really the direction that we're going. We have all of the building blocks, really pulling it together and delivering that cohesive service to our customers.
Amazing. Wow, the audience is filled in. So we would love to open it up to the audience. Wondering if anyone has any questions, Current or Trevor and his journey.
Oh, look at that, hands raised, amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. There was like a race
there,
to
please.
get the hands first. All right, here we go. If you can pass it.
How do you use BigQuery, and what's your transactional engine?
Sorry, I missed that. If I could get, because the speakers are facing this way, very unfortunately.
How do you use BigQuery?
Yeah.
And what's your transactional engine?
Oh, how to use BigQuery and what's your transactional engine? Awesome. BigQuery we use as our data warehouse for analytics. So all of the services that we build export sort of all the API interactions. We store that into GCS and translate it down into BigQuery, and that's used for all of our analytics. Anything that we're doing in terms of model training or other sort of data-related tasks are mostly done out of the GCS exports that we produce on a nightly basis. The transactional engine, I mean, we actually store our system of record in Mongo. That is every single event that happens, whether, when a customer swipes their card, we record that authorization. And then when the settlement comes in, we tie that out and record that as well. We then have a service that we've built that aggregates those documents to basically event source a balance. That's one of the primary functions of the system of record. And we use that ledger to drive all of the financial interactions, whether it's producing an ACH file, reconning with the bank. And so like Mongo for us is really one of the most core pieces of that. And one of the things that we're using on Mongo in particular is the document flexibility. So a card authorization looks very different than a Bitcoin purchase, looks very different than a paycheck. And so the way that we store that metadata is really leveraging the document flexibility that we have in Mongo. But ultimately, we still need to collapse that all into a single balance, $100. That's the answer to the question of like, what is all of this doing? So that's how we've approached building a core banking engine in the cloud.
You partially just answered my question, but I'll dive down a bit further, which is, what is it about the document engine that is suited for the fact that you have different types of transactions?
Yeah, I believe the question was, what is the, how do we leverage the document engine to facilitate transactions? Yeah, so it really comes, like, for Mongo in particular, it's being able to add in whatever metadata is necessary. So we have tons of services that store a lot of the metadata. So for example, if you're getting a reward, we store all the metadata about the merchant that it's linked to in a separate collection, and we store a reference out sort of in the actual ledger. So we have like a collection which is all of the documents that source into a balance, and we can choose how much that metadata needs to be in the ledger itself and how much can be referenced out in a separate collection. So it's really about the flexibility, the ability to create alternative indexes on that data. Actually, most of our more Mongo traditional types of use cases are outside of the ledger itself, and that's where we're using, compound indexes, unique indexes. I would say like the biggest feature that we use, honestly, with Mongo, besides the sharding, is just like the super flexible indexing schemes.
Any other questions for Trevor and Jin? I see the brains percolating. Percolate, percolate, percolate.
I see a question.
Question from Amir.
I was curious how you guys use PubSub.
Yeah.
So that's like, is that like a message queue? Is that a like data streaming similar to Kafka? If I understand correctly, like a Google product?
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe I can talk. Question was like, do we use PubSub and other?
Like how does it use, like with regards to like, is it like with transactions, like specifically like debits, credits, are those things like, are those things like in like a
Yeah.
PubSub stream, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. So generally, because we work with distributed systems, we have to follow best practices when it comes to asynchronous workflows and idempotency. So how it translates into, for example, I'm making a Bitcoin purchase. The first thing that we do is we insert the intent of that into the ledger, which effectively holds the balance, because we, at the same time, a user might be doing a P2P transaction or using their debit card. So we start with sort of that ledger insert of a document, and then through an asynchronous workflow, we can go and facilitate the trade and do whatever. And we're using PubSub for that. So we publish the event, we can subscribe to it in a horizontally scaled service. We execute the item, we insert that transactionally with idempotency to complete the transaction. So what we're doing is tying together sort of you need the right guarantee, and you need to lock and ensure that you're the only one influencing the resource of a wallet is what we model that subledger on. And then you can use asynchronous patterns to facilitate whatever actually needs to happen and confirm it back into the ledger. So we really use that ledger as our, it's the system of record, it's the source of truth, but we use a lot of other technology and patterns to make the reality of like, hey, I'm making an API call, it fails, what do you do? That's just the reality of distributed systems.
Blame my friend here for this question, which is that Mongo is a document. Obviously, it's a document schema. BigQuery basically is surfaced as relational, and so how do you resolve the impedance mismatch between Mongo and BigQuery?
Yeah, it's a great question. So BigQuery for us is really analytics, and we don't connect any of our databases directly to BigQuery. So everything that we're doing when it comes to how we warehouse data and use it for either product purposes of, let's say, training a model or forming some other, feature, like a user feature, an attribute that we store in a separate system. We unify it through a service layer. So all of the interactions with databases go through service layer first. So we manage sort of the DTO of like, here's how the data is actually structured. This is the current language of it. All of our services expose gRPC like protobuf schemas, and that is the language in which the rest of our systems use to interact with that data. So it creates that uniformity. So export and then translate into BigQuery. So our services will keep schema of how do you want to put that into BigQuery, doing your exports. So really leveraging like that service layer abstraction is what allows us to unify different persistence layers into BigQuery.
But the thing is that ultimately, feeding into BigQuery, you're taking data from Mongo. So therefore, even though there is obviously transformation going into a data warehouse, doesn't going from document into relational add additional overhead when you're feeding to BigQuery?
I missed some of that question, but I think you were talking about like there's a challenge of taking a fairly unstructured data and putting it into BigQuery.
Isn't that extra overhead?
It's all done within the service. So as we're publishing new changes, opening pull requests into these services, we're also maintaining and keeping an integration test suite for how does this translate into BigQuery. It's like it's a primitive. It's a native part of how we develop and deploy services. So we're thinking about the business logic, the persistence, and any analytics implications of it, all within the same sort of monorepo paradigm. I'm loving the questions. Everyone into these questions? It's usually better than just
Yeah, it seems like people are
talking.
engaged, taking notes, also thinking about more questions.
I've got more of a, business question about Current. So I've seen a few apps like it that are not banks, but they kind of do some of the things that banks do.
Yeah.
Like display balances, allow people to like to do transactions, right? And I was just wondering, like, what do you see as like, what is the ideal like future for like Current and companies like it? Like, do you see it sort of being parallel to like the traditional banking industry where you just offer services that are distinct to like what you would see at traditional banks, like, you know, Bitcoin and stuff? Or do you see it like kind of like maybe sort of maybe taking the place of traditional banking?
Yeah.
Like what would be like what is your ideal like position in the future?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the reason that we exist is because banking doesn't work for, let's call it 40 to 50 million Americans in particular. And it's because the business models of banks are just not set up to serve someone with very high balance. That's mostly what it comes down to, because like banking 101 is you take a deposit and you lend it out at a higher rate than you're paying for it. So you go to a Chase, a Bank of America, they'll pay you 0.002% on that deposit because, you know, they can, and then they'll go and lend it out with either, you know, credit cards, mortgages, whatever it might be, loans, right? And if you don't have that balance as a checking account or as a core banking customer, you're not valuable to banks. And so there's all these forays that banks will make into, hey, we're going to create like a digital version of this, we're going to provide greater access, but at the end of the day, if you don't align with the business model of the bank, you're a second-class citizen, you're always going to be deprioritized when you're thinking about how to build things. So what we did is we built a business model that is transaction-based. So as people are using cards, as using their credit cards, we make money on the interchange, and we work with banks that there's a regulatory moat around these smaller banks that gives us access to higher interchange rates. And so we have a business model that's like you can live in a negative balance. We offer fee-free overdraft. Our best customers, which we consider our first-class citizens, mostly live in a negative balance because they're living paycheck to paycheck. And we can make them first-class citizens, have positive contribution margins on these types of customers. So there's just like a fundamental mismatch between what a bank can do and what we can do for our customers and the way that we can treat them. So for us, that's a huge market still to go after. When you look at us versus others, it really comes down to that technical advantage, which is everyone's offering all of these different things, but in silos. It's very difficult to manage across all these different balances, and the way that other people in our space approach that, it's pretty heavy. And so by aggregating everything into one place, by really owning that system of record and tying features together, we think that over the long term, convenience and value is going to be the thing that will bring sort of the gravity of all of the customers that are addressable towards Current.
Did you use sharding from the day one, or did you introduce later? And can you tell me the journey, what you faced?
The sharding journey is an amazing one. We've got Hill here who was along with us. Also, MongoDB, amazing like customer service and account reps. I would say definitely a big feature of MongoDB. But we went from a vertically scaled, so we were, you know, it's again, me, not a lot of experience coming into Current, didn't really know totally what I was doing in many cases. I threw all the documents into just M80 at the time. And then it was like, we're running out of headspace here, let's go to an M300. Okay, now let's go to an M600. There's no more, like, we're done, this is it. So we identified, luckily I was able to hire some really awesome people that I've learned a ton from, and we were able to transition into a sharded database. Now that was big. It required a lot of document redesign. It required setting up a parallel service that had a different persistence layer where we were doing real-time replication into this sort of parallel service. But ultimately, like, that's what MongoDB is designed for in sort of sharding context. So today, we have the ability to click a button and go further horizontal. And that was not easy, and it would have been easier if I had like known what I was doing at the beginning, but we got there. That journey, so there was a couple of things that were happening. One, we were moving towards this like more pure service abstraction, which was a critical part. We needed full service penetration so that we could do parallel reads and writes against this thing. So I could write out to the vertical, read from the horizontal, vice versa, switch it up. So that was like the majority of it was prep work. Once we were actually doing the real-time replication, that's easy. You replay data into the sharded version. You've got integration tests and consistency checks that you're doing from the exports to make sure that sort of everything is consistent, and then you cut over. So it's low drama once you do all the prep work. End to end, it took probably eight months to a year, but it was mostly on that abstraction. It was mostly like getting the system mature enough to do that. If we were to do it again, like if we were to move to a different persistence layer or something else. It would just be designing that new persistence, doing your reconciliation. That's a much shorter journey. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more.
What's been your biggest challenge in dealing with MongoDB and Atlas? Has it been performance, cost control, configuration management, or something else?
Yeah, biggest challenge with MongoDB. I think generally, like where I, to the extent that I can have any influence on the progress of Atlas or the progress of MongoDB, performance and reliability is the most important thing. It's like, it's awesome that there's all these extra features that get added that are really developer friendly and probably get people to market a lot faster. But for us, it's just make sure it's reliable, be as fault tolerant as possible. When you're doing maintenance, like make sure that it's done responsibility, and there's been a tremendous in that on the Atlas side. So most of my challenges are just like, I need something where I've got a P99 of 50 milliseconds to retrieve a balance, right? And that's the level of mission criticality that we put MongoDB in the center of that workflow. So that's really what I care about most.
All right. Well, thanks for all these amazing questions. A lot of BigQuery, a lot of great conversations. So Trevor, you're an entrepreneur, technologist, and now we know you're a lip reader, which is amazing because we can't hear a thing up here. So congrats on that. So as we wrap this up, getting started with Atlas on Google is extremely easy. We make it very easy for you. Stop by our booth today. And again, a shameless plug for my colleague Sang Shin, who will be talking today about the Google for Startups program, also the Mongo for Startups program. Come see and learn more about Current and their journey leveraging that startups program. And that's it. So everybody, Trevor, CTO and co-founder of Current, thank you so much for joining us today, and enjoy the conference.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to Trevor and Jin again.